Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a story that's gonna make you sweat, and I'm not talking about the summer heat. Get ready for forbidden desires, a lot of tension, and maybe even a few gasps along the way. We're talking about a married man, a captivating older woman, and a secret affair that could burn everything to the ground. If you're ready to get hooked, keep watching, because this story is juicy. Let me tell you a story. A juicy one, about my secret affair with a woman. It all began when I met this stunning older lady. Her husband living abroad for God knows how many years. And let's be honest, when you have everything money can buy but lack a certain physical touch, well, something's gotta give. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm Aiden, 30 years old, working as an architect. Life's good, stable income, lovely wife, smart kids, the whole 9 yards. The story starts like this. About a month after a big soccer match, my buddy Blake, a doctor at one of the big hospitals in the city, invited me out for some beers. Now, there's nothing unusual about grabbing a beer with your friend. Except this time, Blake brought along a colleague of his, a dentist named Sebastian, who also happened to run a private practice in the city. Pretty successful guy, all things considered, besides the usual guy talking about soccer and whatnot. Sebastian mentioned that he needed someone to design and renovate a villa he and his wife recently bought in the suburbs. Seemed like an easy project for me, especially coming from a friend of Blake's. The main thing was that Sebastian was heading to Germany for a 3-month fellowship soon. He was leaving all the professional matters to me, saying his wife would handle everything else. I called to set up a meeting, and from the first hello, I could tell this woman was something else. She had a pleasant demeanor, a soft, graceful way of speaking. I had a feeling she was gorgeous. We met at a fancy cafe in the city. I was there early, and about 15 minutes later, she pulled up, alone, in her own car. She was even more stunning in person. Elegant, attractive, with a beautiful face. I figured she was a few years older, but she definitely didn't look at it. To put it simply, she could have easily entered a pageant and probably even made it to the final round. "Hi there, you're Aiden, right?" she asked. "Yep, that's me. I'm a friend of Blake's," I replied. "I'm Serafina, Sebastian's wife. Sorry I'm a bit late, traffic was a nightmare," she said. "No worries at all, I just got here myself," I replied with a smile. Even our initial conversation was comfortable. There was something about her, she was easy to talk to. And guys, let's be real, it's always a pleasure chatting with a beautiful woman. But Serafina here, she was more than just a pretty face. She was smart, sophisticated, and carried herself with an alluring confidence that was hard to ignore. I'd say the saying, "certain women just get more attractive with age," was definitely made for her. Although she was a few years older than me, she looked incredibly youthful, probably came from living a good life, I thought. Turns out, she and her husband were the same age, and they'd been together since college. Now she was managing a pharmaceutical and health food company, though she admitted she'd passed on most of the work to her younger sister. They owned a brownstone downtown that they rented out, while Sebastian was always busy with work, studies, and conferences abroad. They had a 10-year-old son, their only child. After the usual exchange of pleasantries and information about our lives, we finally got down to business. "So, like I said earlier, consider me your point person for this project. Anything you need, just let me know," I said. "Oh, I'm hopeless with all that technical stuff. Just handle everything as you see fit. If anything needs changing or adjusting, let me know, or you can send it directly to Sebastian," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Sure, but he's quite busy, isn't he? It might be easier to just communicate with you directly." "Directly is fine, I'm hardly ever busy. If you need me, just give me a call. Anytime, don't hesitate." Well, we're practically family now. No need to be shy. Everything went smoothly after that. This wasn't a huge project, more like a side gig I took on as a favor to Blake. I handed off most of the heavy lifting to one of my technicians and just dropped by occasionally to check on things. From the initial design sketches to the actual construction, I only met with Serafina twice for quick updates. She wasn't too interested in the technical details or the blueprints. Her main concern was the final result. Luckily, the interior had been mostly done before they bought the place, so it didn't require much work. We wrapped that up in about 2 weeks. The exterior work, like landscaping, the outdoor kitchen, and a few other small installations. Took about 10 days to complete. I ran into Blake the other day, and he asked about Sebastian's place. How's that project coming along? He asked. Almost done, I replied. Wow, that was fast. I bet they'll move into the new place as soon as Sebastian gets back. He chuckled. He's such a laid-back guy. Leaves all the decisions to Serafina. She's something else, you know? Always looks so young and radiant. Well, she doesn't really have to lift a finger. They have the brownstone bringing in rent. And then there's her company. Her husband makes good money. And she probably spends her days at the spa. No wonder she looks so good. I joked. My technician called to tell me they had finished installing the last of the furniture. I decided to swing by Willow Creek to check it out before calling Serafina. Hi Serafina? It's Aiden. The furniture installation is done. Would you be free to come take a look? I asked. Okay, great, she replied. Typical Serafina. Always available. I figured I could sneak in a quick visit during my lunch break. So we agreed to meet at the villa around noon. When I got there, she was already admiring the garden. I noticed that she seemed to always wear dresses. Maybe she enjoyed dressing up. Or maybe it was just her style. Whatever it was, she looked stunning. The way the fabric flowed over her figure, revealing a glimpse of her smooth calves, her bare shoulders, the way it accentuated her curves, it was hard to look away. Not that I was complaining, of course. Wow, this woman is gorgeous, I thought to myself, trying to keep my thoughts pure. I took her on a tour of the house, pointing out the finished renovations and explaining some of the technical aspects of the design, like the feng shui elements, the lighting, and the materials used. After covering the interior, we strolled out into the backyard. It's a beautiful property, I remarked. High-end development, pre-built by the developer. Owners can make modifications, of course, but they can't really alter the main structure or the exterior finishes like the tile roof and the windows. We walked around the meticulously landscaped grounds. As expected of an upscale neighborhood, the landscaping was impressive. Trees were strategically planted, and a small stream flowed around the property. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and birds chirped melodiously. It's like a private resort. She sighed. Let's sit for a bit. My feet are killing me. She settled onto a stone bench in the garden. I remained standing next to her, unsure of where to sit. Come on, Aiden, take a load off. Why are you standing? She asked, gesturing to the bench. I politely perched on the edge, ending up closer to her than I intended. Serafina seemed to notice and subtly shifted slightly away, giving us a bit more space. This is much better, she said. The breeze carried a whiff of her perfume, a delicate, floral scent. I'd always been drawn to a woman's fragrance, and hers was intoxicating. It's a beautiful garden, I commented, trying to sound casual. I love it, she replied. It's so peaceful and serene. Being surrounded by nature is so much more relaxing than the city. Yeah, I can see that, I agreed. We'll do a bit more work on the exterior to create a more cohesive look. But nothing too drastic. It's all up to you. Aiden, honestly, I have no idea about these things. Just do whatever you think looks best. Alright, well, how about the interior? Everything okay inside? It's nice. It really is, but it feels a bit empty. Don't you think? She asked hesitantly. You're right, I nodded. We still need to add artwork. I intentionally left some spaces blank for paintings. Ah, that's it. I knew something was missing, she exclaimed. You're good. And here I was, thinking I know nothing about design. You have a good eye. I'll give you that. Well, I have always been drawn to art, especially paintings, and I love flowers. I had a feeling you did, I said, looking at her knowingly. Oh really? How could you tell? She giggled. A hunch, I said with a shrug. I'm pretty good at reading people. Wow, you must be great with your wife then, she chuckled, brushing her hair over her shoulder, releasing another wave of that alluring scent. Architects, we're all secretly romantics, I joked, deciding to steer clear of any personal comments about wives. I had to stop myself from going overboard with the compliments. She was older than me, and I needed to maintain a professional distance. Besides, flattery could be a dangerous game, especially with a woman as captivating as her. As for the interior, we just need to choose some paintings for the bedroom, living room, and dining area, and we're pretty much set. I explained. Really? What kind of paintings would you recommend? Well, considering you're in Sebastian's birth years, There are a few styles that would complement the house perfectly, I said, launching into a detailed explanation of suitable artwork, the placement of screens, miniature landscapes, and other decorative elements. She seemed genuinely interested, hanging on to my every word. I had a knack for storytelling. And with the garden breeze swirling around us, I let my imagination run wild. We should definitely schedule a time to choose the paintings together, I suggested. Would you be free sometime next week? The project moved faster than I anticipated. The construction stayed true to the initial design, and everything fell into place. We had all the resources we needed, especially the most important one, money, thanks to Sebastian's success. I called Serafina to go over the final details. Everything seems to be on track, I said after our brief conversation. The construction is pretty much done. Just a few finishing touches here and there. We walked around the house and the garden one last time. The crew will be done with everything else by tomorrow. They might deliver the paintings tomorrow, too, for hanging. Just let me know if you need anything at all. Okay, I will do it. Thanks so much for everything. Aiden. The next day, I received a call from her around noon. Hi Aiden, it's Serafina. The paintings arrived. Are you free to come over this afternoon? I could really use your help. Unfortunately, I had a prior engagement. I had just finished inspecting another project that morning, and my team and I had plans for a celebratory lunch. I wasn't sure I could make it back in time. Hey Serafina, I texted back. Something came up. I'll swing by if I can wrap things up in time. It was well past 1 by the time we finished lunch. I figured I could spare a few minutes to check in with Serafina. After all, she wouldn't ask unless she needed my help. And it wasn't like I couldn't lend a hand, right? As I pulled into the driveway, I was greeted by a wave of cool air. The lush greenery and the gentle flow of the stream created a tranquil atmosphere. For a moment, I considered just sitting outside for a bit, enjoying the late summer breeze. But then I remembered Serafina's message. It's too hot out here. Come inside where it's cool, she called from the doorway. The air conditioning inside the house was a welcome relief. As I walked into the living room, I noticed Serafina disappearing into the kitchen. Make yourself comfortable, Aiden, she called out. Can I get you something to drink? I was trying to do some gardening this morning, but the sun was brutal. I had to give up and come back inside. I plopped down on the plush sofa, suddenly feeling the effects of the beer and the heavy lunch. The cool air and the comfortable furniture lulled me into a state of drowsy contentment. As I was about to drift off, I saw Serafina walking towards me with a glass of iced tea. She was wearing a loose-fitting dress that looked suspiciously like a nightgown. It was hard not to stare. She bent down to place the glass on the coffee table, giving me an unintentional glimpse of her cleavage. Man, this woman could make a 20-year-old blush. You look beat, Aiden, she chuckled, noticing my stare. Did you have a liquid lunch meeting? Just a couple of beers, I mumbled, trying to play it cool. Well, sit back and relax. I'll tidy up a bit. The workers left this place a mess. Without waiting for a reply, she busied herself around the living room. I leaned back, feeling oddly comfortable, like I was at my sister's house or something. The truth was, I was fighting off sleep. But it wasn't entirely the beer. The unfamiliar environment made it hard to relax completely. I drifted in and out of consciousness, my eyelids feeling heavy. Through blurry vision, I watched Serafina as she cleaned. Her dress kept riding up, revealing glimpses of her toned legs and a flash of black lace. Man, oh man. About 15 minutes later, I woke up with a start. I stumbled to the kitchen and chugged down a glass of cold water, hoping to shake off the drowsiness. I wandered around the living room and noticed that Serafina was now cleaning the bedroom. The paintings look great, I called out. They really fit the space. I think so too, she replied from the bedroom. I'm sure Sebastian will love them. This one in the bedroom is especially nice. Come take a look. I stepped into the bedroom just as Serafina was leaving. The room was spacious and tastefully decorated. I noticed a large vanity table covered with an assortment of cosmetics and perfumes. Her walk-in closet was equally impressive, probably home to hundreds of outfits. I wasn't comfortable lingering in her bedroom, so I quickly walked back out. What do you think? She asked, meeting me in the hallway. Does everything meet with the approval of our resident design expert? It's not about what I think. It's about what you like, I replied. It's your house. After all, did you arrange everything yourself? I did, she said with a hint of pride. I think I have a pretty good eye. Don't you think? It's all about balance and harmony. It looks great, Serafina, I admitted. You have a real knack for design and fashion, of course. She let out a hearty laugh. Her cheeks flushed with pleasure. You're too kind, Aiden. I was a bit worried you'd find it all a bit much. My husband never notices these things anyway. He's happy with whatever. Well, that's what makes a good marriage, right? You two complement each other perfectly. I couldn't help but tease her a little. She was clearly enjoying the compliments. I had to admit, it was refreshing to spend time with someone who appreciated beauty and design as much as I did. I think we're good here, I said, glancing around the house. Everything looks perfect. You sure you didn't just invite me over for a chat about architecture and landscaping? I feel like I'm just here to entertain you. I joked. Women, I thought to myself, they love a good conversation. Especially with a handsome guy. Midweek, I got a call from Serafina. Hey Aiden, she chirped. Are you busy this weekend? I'm making a big dinner at the new house and I'd love for you and your family to come. Consider it a housewarming party. It was a tempting offer. But I couldn't exactly cancel my family's weekend plans for a casual dinner at a client's house. Especially after all the recent close calls. Sorry Serafina, we already have plans this weekend. I said apologetically. How about next weekend? I'm sure we can squeeze in a visit then. Oh, alright, she said, her voice laced with disappointment. Another time then. We actually had a small ceremony at the house a while back. This is just a casual get-together with friends and family. Who else is coming? Blake and his wife will be there. And a few other friends. She said. Sebastian's still stuck in Germany. But he'll be back soon. I felt a pang of guilt for making up an excuse. But I quickly brushed it aside. It was better to maintain some distance. I told myself. I didn't need any more awkward encounters with my alluring client. I spent the week working and catching up with friends. I even found some time to share a few details about my special client with the guys. Some things are just too good to keep to yourself. Then, out of the blue, I got another call from Serafina. Hey there, she said, her voice surprisingly high-pitched. Are you free to come over? There's something I need to talk to you about. Sure, what's up? I asked, trying to sound casual, though my pulse was starting to race. It's better if we talk in person. She insisted. Just come over when you can. It was midday. The sun was scorching, and I was supposed to have lunch with a colleague. But I found myself driving towards Willow Creek instead. Luckily, her place wasn't too far from my office. I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation mixed with a healthy dose of apprehension. As I'd expected, she was already waiting for me. Perched gracefully on the sofa in the living room. A spread of refreshments, iced tea, fruit platters, lay invitingly on the coffee table. Serafina herself was, as always, a vision in a flowing, silky dress that stopped just above her knees. It looked suspiciously like something one might wear to bed. Maybe she's just comfortable like that, I thought to myself, trying to ignore the way my eyes kept drifting towards her legs. It's not like she's unaware of her attractiveness. Then again, any man with working eyesight would have a hard time peeling his gaze away from a woman who looked this good. Maybe she just saw me as a harmless younger friend. Like a kid brother. Aiden, darling, you're here, she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. You'll never guess what happened. My parents and my sister absolutely adore the house. They said it looks amazing. Everyone loves it. That's great. I'm glad to hear it. I smiled. She went on and on about how happy she was with everything, the garden, the layout, the overall design. It was as if she'd been waiting all day to tell someone about it. You know, it was your idea to, she continued, her voice filled with enthusiasm. Hey, those were just suggestions. I laughed. You had the final say. And it's clear you have excellent taste. Oh, stop it. Aiden, you're embarrassing me. She giggled, leaning closer to me. I could smell her perfume. A subtle mix of jasmine and sandalwood, filling my senses. Our arms brushed against each other, sending a jolt of electricity through me. This is dangerous territory, I thought to myself, feeling a familiar stirring in my loins. Just as my thoughts were veering toward the dangerous and inappropriate, Serafina abruptly stood up and walked into the bedroom. Maybe she realized she was a little underdressed for company. I mused. Or maybe she just needed a moment to compose herself. Whatever the reason, she was back in a flash. Aiden, sweetie, she said, settling back onto the sofa. Even closer this time. There's something I want to give you. A little something to thank you for all your help. She placed a small gift bag on the coffee table in front of me. Curious, I picked it up and peeked inside. It contained a thick envelope. Judging by its weight, I suspected it held a considerable amount of cash, probably enough to make a significant dent in my credit card bill. I set the bag down on the table, feeling a wave of discomfort. Serafina, you don't need to do this. It was my pleasure to help. And besides, you already paid me for the project. Don't be silly, Aiden, she insisted, her voice surprisingly firm despite its soft tone. That was for the materials and the crew. This is for you. Consider it a bonus, or a gift for your children. Don't argue with me. But, I can't accept this. It's too much. We're friends, aren't we? I stumbled over my words, feeling increasingly awkward. I mean, I care about you like a sister. And, Aiden, she interrupted, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Let's not pretend. I really enjoyed working with you. It's rare to find someone who understands my vision so completely. And to be honest, I just love spending time with you. Her words, so direct and unexpected, hung in the air between us, charged with a strange intimacy. You do? I stammered, feeling my face flush. Of course I do, she said, her voice dropping to a husky whisper. You're charming, talented, and incredibly easy to talk to. Believe me, any woman would be happy to have you around. Serafina leaned back against the sofa, her gaze lingering on mine. You know, she continued, I don't have to think twice when I'm with you. You just make everything so easy. I'd love for you to come over anytime. Just to relax, enjoy the garden, get some fresh air. You're always welcome here. Her words were an open invitation. A dangerous flirtation. So, is that what this was all about? Just wanted to chat? I asked, trying to lighten the mood. My attempt at humor seemed to fluster her. Well, yes, she stammered, avoiding my gaze. I mean, isn't it nice to just sit and talk sometimes? Especially with someone as charming as you. We shared a nervous laugh, the tension palpable in the air. We continued to snack on the fruit, making small talk. There was a new intimacy to our conversation, a playful banter that bordered on flirtatious. I thought things had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Clearly, I was mistaken. The following day, Serafina called again. Hey Aiden, are you busy with clients today? She asked. Why don't you come over for lunch? I'm making something special. What's on the menu? If it's just spinach and pasta, I'm in. You know I'm not one for fancy food. I joked, though I was already picturing myself back at her luxurious villa. Don't worry, it'll be a simple, home-cooked meal. Just trying to avoid the office cafeteria and enjoy some peace and quiet during my lunch break. I found myself agreeing, once again drawn in by her casual invitation. When I arrived, Serafina was busy in the kitchen. I quietly tiptoed up behind her, hoping to sneak a peek at what she was preparing. Boo, I whispered, startling her. Aiden, you scared me half to death, she shrieked, spinning around with a playful swat on my arm. The sudden movement, combined with the sight of her in that soft, flowing dress, sent a wave of desire through me. For a fleeting moment, all I wanted was to pull her close and kiss her. I mentally slapped myself, pushing those thoughts aside. To my surprise, the table was set with a simple yet delicious spread: pasta, a flavorful vegetable soup, a perfectly grilled steak, and a platter of succulent shrimp. Wow, Serafina, you really outdid yourself, I said, impressed. This looks amazing. It's nothing special, she replied with a shrug, taking a seat opposite me. Just something I threw together. She paused, then added, I've actually been spending a lot of time here at the new house lately. I love it here. Much more peaceful than the city. I can imagine, I replied. So, when does Sebastian get back? Soon, thankfully. We're planning on moving the whole family here permanently once he's back. It'll be so much better for our son, too, being closer to nature and all. Sounds idyllic, I commented, taking a bite of the steak. She was right, it was delicious. Sebastian must be thrilled. He's one lucky guy. He never says much, she said with a sigh. But I'm sure you'll appreciate it eventually. He usually shows his appreciation in other ways. I chuckled, choosing not to comment on that last statement. As we were finishing up, Serafina excused herself and returned with a clay pot, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. What's that? I asked, intrigued. Something new. Ever tried stewed oxtail? I peered into the pot. It contained several chunks of meat that could only be described as, well, let's just say they were definitely from the rear end of an animal. I grimaced. I can't say I have. I admitted. It's a delicacy, she said, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Trust me, it's delicious. And very potent. I hesitantly took a bite. The taste was unusual. But not bad. Serafina watched me intently, gauging my reaction. So, what do you think? Not bad. Not bad, I conceded. Definitely different. This calls for a celebration, she announced. Rising from her chair, she retrieved a bottle of wine from a cabinet and poured us each a glass. What's this? Looks fancy, I said, examining the amber liquid. What are you trying to get me drunk on? My wife will kill me. Don't worry, she chuckled, handing me a glass. It's a special kind of wine. Medicinal. Good for you. Just try it. We made a toast and clinked glasses. The wine was unlike anything I'd ever tasted, not quite Wolka. Not quite like the local wine either. It had a strange, earthy flavor, and it warmed me from the inside out. This is interesting, I said, taking another sip. The combination of the rich food, the exotic wine, and Serafina's undeniable charm was starting to have an effect on me. I felt a surge of warmth spread through my body, and my thoughts became increasingly hazy. I needed to talk more, to release some of this pent-up energy. You know, I began, this wine is something else. It's unlike any wine I've ever tasted. You know, I could give you a few bottles to take home. Serafina offered, her cheeks flushed. It's a family recipe, passed down through generations, and I'll even include some of my favorite skincare products, they work wonders. Trust me, I use them religiously. She caught me staring at her, a playful smirk on her face. What? She asked, her eyes twinkling. Don't you believe me? Seeing is believing, right? I couldn't help but chuckle at her boldness. Oh, I believe you, I said, raising my glass in a mock toast. Your skin is flawless, Serafina. This wine, and your beauty routine, your husband must be a very happy man. She laughed, her gaze lingering on mine for a beat too long. Oh, Sebastian, he wouldn't know good wine if it hit him in the face. He's more of a beer and whiskey guy. Tried to get him into this. But, she trailed off with a shrug. The alcohol was definitely loosening my tongue. So, what you're saying is, your husband doesn't appreciate the finer things in life. Shame. That's what we're here for then, I said, winking playfully. We fell into a comfortable silence. The air thick with unspoken tension. The potent wine had ignited a pleasant warmth within me, making me more talkative and bolder than usual. I don't even need to drink anything. And I'm already feeling chatty, I admitted with a self-deprecating laugh. My wife says I have a talent for smooth talking. Serafina's eyes widened slightly, and a delicate blush crept up her neck, a stark contrast to her usually composed demeanor. Somehow, we ended up discussing more intimate topics, our inhibitions melting away with each shared laugh and stolen glance. After lunch, we moved to the living room, sipping on iced tea. Serafina's cheeks remained flushed, a clear sign that the medicinal wine had been stronger than she'd let on. Are you all right? I asked, concerned. You seem flushed. Maybe that wine wasn't such a good idea after all. It's nothing, just a bit warm, that's all, she said dismissively. I'll be fine after some water. I glanced at my watch. I should probably get going, I said, rising to my feet. Don't want to wear out my welcome. Are you sure? Don't you have to work at the Brownstone this afternoon? She asked. No, I'm taking the rest of the day off, I replied. Good, she said simply. Get some rest. I started toward the door, but a sudden call from behind made me stop in my tracks. Aiden, wait. I turned around to see Serafina rushing towards me, her face pale. Suddenly, she tripped over a rug and let out a sharp cry. I watched in horror as she fell to the ground, a small bag tumbling from her grasp. Serafina, I exclaimed, rushing to her side. She was sitting on the floor, clutching her ankle, her face contorted in pain. Ouch, that's gonna leave a mark. She winced. I knelt down beside her, my heart pounding. What happened? Are you okay? I think I twisted my ankle. She groaned. It hurts like hell. Here, let me help you up, I said, reaching for her arm. I pulled her gently, but she cried out in pain again. Ouch. Aiden, be careful, she hissed, pulling away from my grasp. I could see the panic rising in her eyes. I can't seem to put any weight on it, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Do you think it could be broken? Her helplessness stirred a primal instinct within me, a need to protect and comfort. I gently felt around her ankle, my touch surprisingly gentle for someone who had just downed a few glasses of potent homemade wine. It doesn't feel broken, I said reassuringly, though I couldn't be sure. But it's definitely swelling up. We need to put some ice on it. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and gratitude. I have some ointment in the bedroom. Could you? Sure, where is it? I'll get it for you, I said, eager to help. Just inside, on the vanity table, she said, her voice catching in her throat. Let me just try to get up. She tried to stand again, but her leg buckled beneath her. Here, let me carry you, I offered. Without thinking, I wrapped my arms around her, gently lifting her from behind. I tried not to notice the scent of her perfume, or the feel of her soft skin against my own. Rougher one, let's get you off your feet, I said, scooping her up into my arms before she could protest. She let out a soft gasp of surprise, her arms instinctively circling my neck. I carried her into the bedroom, heading straight for the bed. Just put me down on the vanity chair, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't help but chuckle inwardly. So demanding. This one, I was already carrying her, and now I had to put her down so she could reach for the ointment herself? Some patience, I swear. The bedroom seemed to amplify all of Serafina's alluring scents, a heady mix of her perfume, the fresh linen, a hint of something feminine and utterly intoxicating. My resolve, never particularly strong to begin with, was starting to crumble. Right here? I asked, stopping in front of the vanity table. Lower, please, she said, wincing slightly as I gently lowered her onto the plush stool. Ouch, it really hurts, she whimpered, pointing to her knee. I wasn't sure what role I was playing at this point, concerned friend. Overly helpful contractor? Whatever it was, I felt strangely compelled to ease her pain. Let me take a look, I offered, kneeling down in front of her. No, it's fine, she said, waving her hand dismissively. I can manage. You should go home, Aiden. I ignored her protests. Nonsense. Give me the ointment. I'll do it, I insisted, taking the tube from her hand. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine, before finally relenting with a sigh. I could tell she wanted to argue, but the pain was clearly getting to her. And honestly, when a beautiful woman asks for help, what choice do you have? I began gently massaging the ointment onto her knee, careful not to press too hard. The ointment had a pleasant, soothing scent, but it did little to mask the heat radiating from her skin. My own pulse was racing now, and I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my temple. This wasn't just about her ankle anymore. Serafina leaned back, closing her eyes, her chest rising and falling rhythmically. I continued to massage her ankle, my touch slowly trailing up her calf, then back down again. I felt her muscles tense beneath my touch, and she bit down on her lower lip, stifling a moan. The air crackled with unspoken tension. The room seemed to shrink, enveloping us in an intimate bubble. I could hear her soft breaths, and feel the warmth of her skin beneath my fingertips. For a fleeting moment, our eyes met in the mirror, and I saw a flicker of something raw and undeniable reflected back at me. Feeling better? I asked, my voice husky. She didn't answer, just nodded slightly, her eyes still closed. I let my gaze drop to her leg, my pulse quickening at the sight of her smooth skin beneath the flimsy fabric of her dress. The air hung heavy with unspoken desire, the silence stretching into an eternity. I knew I should stop, should gently pull away and pretend that this was all perfectly innocent. But some primal instinct had taken over, and I was powerless to resist. Neither of us spoke, but her hands, resting on my shoulders, tightened their grip. I leaned closer, my lips brushing against her earlobe. The flimsy blanket we had been sharing had fallen to the floor. Forgotten. Time seemed to stand still as we surrendered to the moment, our bodies moving together with a desperate urgency. Afterwards, I woke to an empty bed. The sound of running water told me that Serafina was in the shower. I lay there for a while, my mind racing, my body still tingling with the afterglow of our encounter. What had just happened? Serafina? I called out tentatively, but there was no answer. Had I imagined the whole thing? Just then, I heard her voice, muffled by the sound of the running water. You can go, Aiden. I'll call you later. I left the villa feeling dazed and confused, as if I'd just woken from a strange, vivid dream. Guilt gnawed at my conscience as I drove home. I'd crossed a line, succumbed to temptation in the worst way possible. I'd betrayed my wife, my family, and even my friend Sebastian. The weight of my actions threatened to crush me. The guilt lingered for a while, but as the day wore on, it was replaced by a strange mix of exhilaration and shame. I tried to convince myself that it was a one-time thing, a momentary lapse in judgment. The next day, I went to work as usual, trying to push the events of the previous day to the back of my mind. But as I sat in my office that afternoon, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I needed to say something to Serafina. Serafina, about yesterday, I'm so sorry, I texted, my fingers trembling slightly as I hit send. It wasn't until later that evening that I received a reply. It's okay, she texted back, let's just forget it ever happened. I sent another message, hoping to gauge her mood. How's your ankle? Feeling any better? It's much better, thank you, I can walk on it now. Later that week, Blake invited me to a barbecue at Serafina's place. It was a casual affair, a chance for friends and family to celebrate the new house. I wasn't sure I should go, but I couldn't think of a good excuse. My wife and kids were spending the weekend at my in-laws' place for a family reunion. Just a heads up, Blake said over the phone. I heard Serafina twisted her ankle the other day. Nothing serious, but you might want to take it easy on her. Taking it easy was the last thing on my mind. But I decided to play it cool. I would go, I decided, but I'd be on my best behavior. After all, what was done was done. No point in making things any weirder than they already were. By the time I arrived at Willow Creek, the party was in full swing. Serafina's parents were inside, keeping an eye on the kids who were running around the yard, while a group of women chatted and prepped food by the barbecue. The men, including Blake, were gathered near the garden, smoking cigars and discussing the finer points of landscaping and homeownership. Where's the wife and kids? Blake asked as I joined them. They're at my in-laws this weekend, I explained, trying to sound casual. I noticed Serafina hovering near the patio, a glass of wine in hand. She looked radiant, her ankles seemingly healed, her eyes sparkling with laughter. I felt a pang of guilt, followed by a rush of desire, as our eyes met across the crowded yard. Thankfully, she managed to maintain her composure, and we exchanged polite greetings, like any two acquaintances would at a social gathering. The barbecue was a lively affair, with everyone enjoying the delicious food, the warm weather, and the company of friends. The mood was light and festive, a stark contrast to the tension-filled encounter Serafina and I had shared just days earlier. As the afternoon wore on, the beer flowed freely, and someone brought out a bottle of Serafina's medicinal wine. The men, intrigued by Blake's glowing reviews, were eager to try it. Their wives, not wanting to be left out, joined in as well. The alcohol had its intended effect, loosening tongues and fueling conversations. The men became increasingly boisterous, their laughter echoing through the garden. Even the women, usually more reserved, seemed to let loose, their conversations filled with laughter and uncharacteristic candor. I found myself increasingly captivated by their conversations, a mix of gossip, personal anecdotes, and surprisingly frank discussions about relationships and intimacy. They seemed oblivious to my presence, lost in their own world of shared secrets and knowing glances. The potent wine was definitely making its presence known. I tried to maintain a safe distance from Serafina, focusing my attention on the food and the lively conversations around me. It wasn't easy. Every time I looked at her, all I could think about was that afternoon in her bedroom, her soft skin beneath my touch, the taste of her lips. I had to remind myself to keep my eyes to myself. The other husbands might not appreciate my lingering glances at their wives, especially after a few drinks. One woman in particular caught my eye, a striking brunette named Skylar. She was a friend of Serafina's, a single mother with a sharp wit and a carefree spirit. I'd heard she was recently divorced, something about her being too wild for her husband to handle. I found myself drawn to her confidence and her unapologetically flirtatious nature. I couldn't shake off the feeling that Serafina might have confided in Skylar about our encounter. The thought made me uneasy. Thankfully, if she had said anything, no one seemed to notice anything amiss. As the evening wore on, and the guests started to thin out, I received a text from Serafina. Aiden, can you stay behind for a bit? There's something I need to talk to you about. My pulse quickened. What could she possibly want to talk about at this hour? Luckily, Skylar announced that she was leaving early and needed a ride. Perfect. I volunteered to drive her home, figuring it was a good way to avoid any awkwardness with the other guests. Once Skylar was safely on her way, I returned to Willow Creek, my curiosity overriding any lingering doubts. I found Serafina sitting alone on the garden bench, seemingly lost in thought. Hey, I said softly, approaching her, what are you still doing out here? Donating blood? I joked, trying to lighten the mood. Just getting some fresh air, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. It's a bit stuffy inside. I took a step closer, stopping a respectful distance away. I couldn't bring myself to meet her gaze, so I focused on the distant glow of the streetlights. Serafina, I began, my voice thick with regret. About the other day, I don't know what came over me. I'm so sorry. She held up a hand, silencing me. Please, Aiden, she whispered. Don't. It was my fault. I was reckless. I hope you don't think any less of me. She paused for a moment, her gaze fixed on some unseen point in the distance. Let's just forget it ever happened. Pretend it was all a bad dream. Her words, spoken with such quiet desperation, stirred a mix of emotions within me: guilt, desire, a strange sense of protectiveness. The potent wine, the late hour, the intoxicating scent of her perfume mingling with the night air. My carefully constructed walls of restraint were crumbling faster than I cared to admit. I sank down onto the bench beside her, keeping a safe distance, but close enough to catch a whiff of her intoxicating scent. I wanted to reach for her, to pull her close and apologize for everything, but I held myself back. We sat in silence for a while, our gazes fixed on opposite ends of the garden, each lost in our own thoughts. The air throbbed with unspoken tension, punctuated by the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of traffic. How's your ankle? I asked, breaking the silence. My voice sounded strained, even to my own ears. Better, she murmured, glancing down at her leg. Just a little bruise. It's nothing. I followed her gaze, my eyes drawn to the soft curve of her calf beneath the hem of her dress. It was as if that afternoon had never happened, yet the memory of it hung heavy between us. I desperately wanted to erase the awkwardness, to go back to the time when our interactions had been easy and carefree. Unable to bear the silence any longer, I stood up and started plucking at the leaves of a nearby fern. The gardenias smell lovely tonight, don't they? I remarked, hoping to fill the void with something. Anything, other than the unspoken tension that crackled between us. They do, she sighed. They always remind me of college. The guys used to sneak into people's gardens and steal the flowers for the girls. We'd tuck them into our blouses, our bags, even our desks. The whole campus would smell like gardenias. You always were a romantic, weren't you? I said with a wry smile. I walked over to a nearby gardenia bush and carefully plucked a few of the freshly bloomed blossoms. Here, I said, holding them out to her. For you. Their delicate fragrance filled my senses as I held them toward her, amplifying the emotions swirling within me. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that this connection, this undeniable attraction, was something more than just a fleeting infatuation. You said you wanted to talk to me about something? I asked, my voice softer than intended. I can't remember, she stammered, avoiding my gaze. I must be losing it. Getting old, you know, she laughed nervously. You'll be calling me, ma'am, next. I couldn't help but chuckle at her attempt at humor. I doubt that, I said, my gaze sweeping over her, taking in her beauty. You're too stunning to ever be mistaken for a ma'am. She laughed again, a low, throaty sound that sent shivers down my spine. She was quiet for a moment, then looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and longing. Aiden, she began, her voice trembling slightly. This isn't right. We shouldn't see each other anymore. I mean, outside of work, of course. I knew, deep down, that she was right. This path we were on could only lead to heartbreak and regret. I understand, I said softly, my heart sinking. I turned away from her, unable to bear the look in her eyes. It's for the best. We'll just be friends, colleagues. Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing. My body filled with a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. I started walking towards my car, my footsteps echoing on the pavement. I had to get out of there. Had to put some distance between us before I did something stupid. Something we would both regret. Aiden, wait. Serafina's voice, filled with urgency, stopped me in my tracks. I turned around, my heart pounding in my chest. Before I could even process what was happening, I felt her arms wrap around me, pulling me close. Her lips met mine in a kiss that was both desperate and tender. All thoughts of guilt, of right and wrong, vanished from my mind. The only thing that mattered was the feel of her body pressed against mine. The intoxicating scent of her perfume. The taste of her lips on mine. Without a word, I swept her into my arms, my body responding instinctively to hers. We stumbled towards the house, our breaths mingling in the warm night air. The gardenia blossoms I had given her fell to the ground, forgotten, as we surrendered to the intoxicating pull of our desire. This is just the beginning of Aiden and Serafina's story. What started as a simple renovation project has transformed into something far more complex. Far more dangerous. Will they choose passion or responsibility? Family or freedom? Only time will tell. Let me know your predictions in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.